All your favorite wrestling shows rolled into one. Welcome to the We Book It podcast. Let's start the show.
Yo. Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Sunday Night Stunner. As you can see, you look to my left, you look to my right, there is no We Book It crew. I gave the crew the weekend off to enjoy this 4th of July weekend, but I actually wanted to do something I've been meaning to do for a long time. I want to talk about one of my favorite superstars, and this is going to be something that may start happening regularly on the podcast. Is I want to do superstar spotlights, and this superstar spotlight for this episode is none other than the one, the only, the almighty Bobby Lashley. So we're going to be covering the career of the almighty Bobby Lashley with one question in mind: who really killed Bobby Lashley's momentum? And what I mean by that is Bobby Lashley has been one of my favorite WWE superstars since he ever arrived. I loved Bobby Lashley in TNA. I enjoyed Bobby Lashley in OVW. I have not enjoyed Bobby Lashley in AEW. And I blame one person for that. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm flawed in this, but as we go about this episode and we kind of preview and highlight the things with Bobby Lashley, you guys feel free to comment your thoughts below as you watch this video. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think or what you feel about this. And yeah, man, I'm just excited to talk about this with you. So let's think about it like this. How many times have we seen it happen in professional wrestling? A wrestler gets frustrated. Their contract is winding down. Another company comes calling. The grass suddenly looks greener on the other side. They're promised fresh opportunities, bigger matches, more freedom, better creative. Before you know it, poof, they're gone. Sometimes the gamble pays off. Sometimes it changes the industry forever. Think about Cody Rhodes leaving AEW and returning home to WWE. That gamble made him a bigger star than he'd ever been before. Oh, by the way, 3-time WWE Champion, also starring in the film Street Fighter coming out later this year. That Cody Rhodes. Think about Drew McIntyre leaving WWE, rebuilding himself in TNA or Impact Wrestling at that time, and then coming back as a main event player, working his way through NXT, winning the NXT Championship, and then debuting back on the main roster. But sometimes the gamble just fails. Sometimes a wrestler walks away from a position that thousands of wrestlers would kill to have, only to realize too late that they've already had the best spot in the business. And in my humble opinion, as somebody that's watched wrestling since 1999, that's exactly what happened to one of my favorites, Bobby Lashley. That's right. Bobby Lashley has, for as long as I can remember, been one of my favorite wrestlers. Now, before anybody starts typing in the comments, let me be very clear. This isn't saying Bobby Lashley isn't talented. It's quite the opposite, actually. I think Bobby Lashley is one of the most physically gifted professional wrestlers of the last 20 years. He's a former WWE champion, former ECW champion, former multiple-time United States champion, a dominant force, a legitimate athlete, a believable badass, a man who could stand up to the likes of Brock Lesnar, Big Show, Drew McIntyre, Braun Strowman, Roman Reigns, and go toe-to-toe with all those guys, not only in the ring, but on the mic. A man who in his 40s looked like he could beat almost anybody alive. Outside of Brock Lesnar, there is not another specimen alive walking God's green earth that looks like Bobby Lashley. So how did someone with all of that momentum end up just feeling smaller? I mean, that's the really question. That's the really big question here. And why does Bobby Lashley feel like less of a star today than he did 2 years ago? And more importantly, who is responsible for this? Was it WWE? Was it Tony Khan? Or was it the man standing beside him the entire time? Montel Vontavious Porter, MVP. When Bobby Lashley returned to WWE in 2018, the comeback didn't exactly go the way that we originally thought. I mean, there were flashes, there were decent feuds, but nothing that screamed future WWE champion. And if we're being honest, WWE didn't seem to know exactly what Lashley was supposed to be. He smiled too much. He was cutting awkward babyface promos. He was stuck in forgettable stories. He looked like a killer, but he wasn't being presented like one. Then everything changed. MVP returned to WWE. And guys, that's important because I want to make something crystal clear before we get any further. Without MVP, I don't think Bobby Lashley's WWE Championship run ever happens. That's not taking away from Lashley. That's simply giving MVP the credit he deserves. MVP gave Lashley something he desperately needed: a voice, a confidence, a direction. Suddenly, Bobby didn't have to explain why he was dangerous. MVP did it for him. See Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman. He stood beside Lashley. He dressed him like $1 million. He spoke with conviction. And every word he said made Lashley feel even more intimidating. Guys, the partnership worked beautifully for these two. I mean, they worked together like peanut butter and jelly. And then came the Hurt Business. Shelton Benjamin, Cedric Alexander, MVP, Bobby Lashley. One of the coolest factions WWE had produced in years. Fans loved them. Critics loved them. Merchandise sold. The presentation was fresh. For the first time in years, Bobby Lashley didn't just look like a star. He actually felt like one. He eventually defeated Drew McIntyre to become WWE Champion. And it wasn't a fluke either. It felt earned. Then came arguably the biggest endorsement of Lashley's career. He spent months feuding with Brock Lesnar. This is what everybody wanted to see. This was the money shot. This is what we thought Lashley could be. The opposition to Brock Lesnar. This is something we didn't even get from Batista. We never got that Brock Lesnar-Batista matchup. We saw Bobby Lashley versus Batista. We saw Bobby Lashley versus Brock Lesnar, but we never got Brock Lesnar versus Batista. Not many people get that opportunity to work with Brock Lesnar. But WWE, and more importantly, Vince McMahon, saw something in Bobby Lashley as someone who belonged near the top of the card. Was he Roman Reigns, the crown apparent? No. But very few people were. Roman became the centerpiece of WWE during one of the most dominant championship reigns in company history. Almost everyone else was fighting for the next top spot beneath him. And Bobby Lashley was consistently in that conversation. He worked with Brock. He worked with Seth. He worked with AJ. He remained a featured attraction. It's not a wrestler WWE had given up on. That's a wrestler WWE still viewed as a valuable piece. But then came Bobby's contract year. As Lashley's WWE deal approached its expiration, questions naturally began to surface about his future. Could he stay? Would he leave? Was another company interested? The answer to that last question appeared to be yes. AEW. Now, here's where the story gets interesting because MVP has openly acknowledged that he encouraged Bobby Lashley to explore life outside of WWE. In interviews discussing the period, MVP said he was in Lashley's ear telling him not to immediately resign and to consider the opportunities elsewhere. Now, again, that's a significant admission. Not because it proves Lashley left solely because of MVP, but because it confirms MVP was actively encouraging him to look beyond WWE. Now, listen, that's important. That's very important to this story. Why is it important? Because he told him, do whatever makes you happy, and saying, don't sign yet, see what else is out there. Ultimately, Bobby Lashley made his own decision. No one forced him to put pen to paper. He's an experienced veteran who has always been responsible for his own career. But trusted advisors matter, especially in professional wrestling. If someone you've ridden with for years tells you another opportunity could be better, you're going to weigh that option seriously. Guys, know this, MVP was not just a manager. He was a friend, a business partner, a mentor, someone Bobby Lashley trusted. And that trust carried weight. Now, at the same time, Lashley has spoken publicly about wanting meaningful stories and opportunities wherever he wrestled next. From his perspective, it wasn't simply about changing companies. It was about finding the best fit for the next chapter of his career. Now, on paper, you can understand why AEW looked appealing. Fresh opponents, dream matches, the possibility of working with stars he had never faced, a lighter schedule, creative freedom. It all sounded like roses. I mean, it may be even great, but professional wrestling isn't won on paper. It's won through execution. And that's where, in my opinion, this storyline begins to unravel. Because leaving leaving WWE isn't automatically a mistake. Leaving WWE without a better plan is. The question wasn't whether AEW could sign Bobby Lashley. The question was whether AEW had a clear vision for Bobby Lashley once he arrived. That's the question that matters most. I don't think the answer was yes. Honestly, not even close. Instead of feeling like a rival of one of the most dominant heavyweights of his generation, Lashley's run quickly became another example of familiar criticism directed at AEW. Signing a major name is one thing, but sustaining that momentum is another. And that's where the spotlight shifts. Because if MVP helped convince Lashley to make the jump, then our good friend Tony Khan had the responsibility to justify the decision with consistent and compelling booking. And in my opinion, that's where the story takes its most diminishing return. Because Bobby Lashley literally has not had that much, if any, success really in AEW. Now, when Bobby Lashley arrived in AEW, there was genuine excitement. Whether you were an AEW fan, a WWE fan, or simply a wrestling fan, it was hard not to imagine the possibilities. Guys, listen, this is a former WWE champion coming into AEW to cement his legacy. This man looked like $1,000,000, dressed like $1,000,000, wrestled like $1,000,000. He could do it all. A five-tool player is what we call Bobby Lashley. He looked like a superstar. He still carried himself like one. And at that age, when many wrestlers began to slow down, Lashley remained one of the most physically imposing athletes in the industry. And on paper, this should have been one of AEW's biggest acquisitions. The question wasn't whether Bobby Lashley was talented enough to make an impact. The question was whether AEW had a long-term vision for him. But before we get to him going to AEW, let's back up really quickly. Let's talk about Triple H and his takeover of creative once Vince McMahon sold WWE to TKO. Triple H took over creative. And as soon as Triple H took over creative, Bobby Lashley, but more importantly, MVP, became very loud about their feelings towards the creative booking. They wanted to make sure Bobby Lashley was placed in a great light and that his character was sustained. They had already broken up the Hurt Business. Bobby Lashley was back out on his own. And yet and still, he wanted to make sure that you never had another scene like what he had to do with Lana in front of Rusev. Triple H, however, according to MVP and according to Bobby Lashley, did not give them the time of day. They kept asking for meeting after meeting after meeting, and Triple H kept finding reasons to put them off. It's one of the reasons why on today, even to this day, AEW's MVP trashes Triple H any chance he gets. He thinks he's a racist. He thinks that he's a terrible human being. He wants to fight Triple H, and he has a lot of smoke for him. However, however, still to this day, we look at this and we say to ourselves, what an opportunity missed if Triple H did not sign Bobby Lashley to another deal, or if he didn't see in Bobby Lashley what Vince McMahon saw. According to Bobby Lashley himself, Vince McMahon always knew how to book Bobby Lashley the right way. Bobby trusted Vince with his character and with his career. Vince is the reason Bobby Lashley came back to WWE in 2018 in the first place. And so from there, it was a no-brainer that he was going to be booked the way that he should. Now let's go back to his time in AEW. Professional wrestling is filled with examples of companies signing major stars because it generates excitement. The harder part isn't making the debut. It's sustaining the momentum after the surprise wears off. A debut gets people talking for a week. A story keeps them talking for 6 months. When Lashley debuted, there was immediate intrigue. Pairing him with MVP again made just typical sense. The chemistry had already been established, not only in WWE, but also in TNA as the BDK. I'm sorry, it was Impact at that time. But the Beatdown crew. And there was even reason to believe they could recreate some of the magic. MVP has always been one of wrestling's strongest talkers. I mean, literally from the moment he burst on the scene as SmackDown's highest paid athlete, MVP immediately grabbed the mic and went scorched earth pretty much every week, fighting the likes of Undertaker and Kane, going toe-to-toe with wrestlers like Ken Kennedy, winning the United States Championship, facing off and tagging with Matt Hardy. MVP has seen much success in his wrestling career. He was never a world title contender. However, MVP still carried himself well within the company, and that's why he was welcomed back once they brought back Bobby Lashley. Now, look at their time in AEW. This pairing was not the problem. The challenge was everything that came after putting these two back together. Instead of feeling like an arrival of a man who should immediately shake up the main event scene, Lashley's role often felt disconnected from AEW's biggest stories. That's not to say he wasn't featured. I mean, he was there. But being on television and being positioned as one of the company's defining attractions aren't always the same thing. That's an important distinction. When Bobby Lashley was presented at his peak in WWE, the audience understood exactly where he stood in the hierarchy. He was a world champion, a legitimate threat, someone who looked capable of beating anyone on the roster. Even when he wasn't holding the WWE Championship, he felt important because WWE consistently presented him as a dangerous obstacle. That aura matters. Could you imagine AEW signing Brock Lesnar and putting him in as a tag team champion? You would look at yourself and say, what the heck are you doing? Guys, fans invest in stars who feel like stars. And in my view, AEW never fully captures the same feeling that he had in WWE. Some fans will disagree. And listen, that's fair. Comment below your thoughts. They'll argue that Lashley has been protected, that he's still presented as dominant, and that AEW has a deep roster with many top names competing for television time, let alone the AEW World Championship. And those may be reasonable points. But the fact that Bobby Lashley has not been taken seriously or seriously been put into the World Championship title picture is a crime. AEW's roster is stacked with exceptional talent. But Jon Moxley is a multi-time AEW World Champion. MJF, great guy, multiple-time AEW World Champion. Hangman Adam Page, multiple time AEW World Heavyweight Champion. CM Punk, multiple time AEW World Heavyweight Champion. Samoa Joe, AEW World Heavyweight Champion. But you couldn't find a time for Bobby Lashley to become your AEW World Heavyweight Champion? Do you not understand, Tony Khan, the credence and the respect that he brings to that championship belt if you put that title on him? And this is one of the reasons why I question Tony Khan's booking of Bobby Lashley. I don't think he knows what to do with him. When you bring in someone with Bobby Lashley's resume, the audience naturally expects that signing to change the landscape. If it doesn't, people begin thinking or asking why the signing happened in the first place. It's not a criticism of Lashley. It's a question about the creative direction. Tony Khan has often spoke publicly about wanting to create exciting matchups and reward fans with compelling wrestling. He's also consistently praised veterans who bring credibility and experience to the locker room. Those goals actually do make sense, but a compelling matchup isn't always enough on its own. Great wrestling promoters don't simply create dream matches, and that's my biggest problem with AEW. They literally have a whole pay-per-view called Wrestle Dream, where it's dream matches that you can just dream up, whether they make sense, whether there's storylines behind them, whatever Tony Khan can dream up in his head and whatever is put on social media. That's where I think AEW has occasionally struggled with major acquisitions. We've seen talented wrestlers arrive with enormous fanfare. We see it all the time. The lights go out. The fans hear the music. You know it's all about that boom. The fight of the Valkyries. Out walks Bryan Danielson. All of these debuting stars. Samoa Joe. But yet and still, sometimes they miss the mark with the creative past how they bring them out. Every fan could probably think of one or two names where the debut felt bigger than what followed. Whether you agree with that assessment or not, it's a discussion that has followed AEW for several years, and Bobby Lashley became part of that conversation. Now, let's bring MVP back into the picture fold. Earlier, we discussed how MVP has acknowledged encouraging Bobby Lashley to consider opportunities outside of WWE rather than immediately resigning. Now, again, it doesn't mean MVP made the decision for him, but Bobby Lashley is responsible for his own career. But trusted advisors influence decisions. That's true in wrestling. It's true in business, and it's true in everyday life. If someone you trust believes that there's a better opportunity waiting, you're naturally going to give that opportunity serious consideration. The difficult question is this: did the opportunity turn out to be actually better? That's where my opinion diverges from what many had hoped would happen. When Lashley left WWE, he walked away from a company that had already established him as a credible main event star. He wasn't starting from scratch. He didn't need a complete reinvention. He simply needed a promotion that would maintain or elevate that perception. Now, I'm not convinced AEW accomplished that. Instead, it often felt as though Lashley was another important name added to an already crowded roster rather than a singular attraction around whom major stories could be built. And that's unfortunate because Bobby Lashley isn't just another wrestler. He's someone who, when presented correctly, feels larger than life. The wrestling business doesn't produce many athletes like Bobby Lashley. That's why expectations were so high when he came to AEW. It's also why the criticism has been so loud whenever fans feel expectations haven't been met. Now, to be fair, not every issue can be placed on one person's shoulders. Creative is collaborative. Timing matters. Injury, roster depth, television priorities, and business considerations all play a role in shaping what viewers ultimately see on the screen. Reducing any wrestler's career to a single cause would oversimplify a much more complicated reality. But as an editorial, I keep coming back to one central question. If Bobby Lashley was already viewed as a legitimate main event talent in WWE, Has his standing in wrestling world become stronger since making the move? And to be quite honest with you guys, for me, the answer is absolutely not. Not because he suddenly became a worse wrestler, not because he lost any physical gifts, not because fans stopped respecting him, but because the sense that he was one of the industry's premier attractions hasn't been reinforced in the same way. And in wrestling, momentum is everything. You can look the same, perform the same, train the same. Yet, if the audience no longer feels you're one of the promotion's biggest stars, your overall aura just begins to change. That's the challenge Bobby Lashley has faced since leaving WWE. Bobby Lashley's talent never disappeared. It was the same this first go around in WWE. It was the same in TNA. And now, for some odd reason, it has disappeared since he has come to AEW. The perception of Bobby Lashley has shifted. And once perception changes in professional wrestling, earning it back is one of the hardest things any performer can do. That brings us to the final piece of the story. Because if Tony Khan deserves scrutiny for how Lashley has been presented, what responsibility belongs to MVP, the man who publicly encouraged him to look elsewhere? After everything we've discussed, Bobby Lashley's rise, his championships, all of these things, the influence of MVP and his move to AEW. It's the feeling the fans have when a wrestler walks through the curtain. It's the belief that this person matters. That they're about to change the direction of a show. At Bobby Lashley's peak in WWE, that's what he felt like. When his music hit, audiences knew they were about to see someone who looked and carried himself like a legitimate world champion. Before Bobby Lashley left, he was working with the Street Profits, and it looked like they were about to create a brand new faction. Bobby Lashley had been feuding with Drew McIntyre, Brock Lesnar, or competing for the WWE Championship. It just felt like Bobby Lashley belonged at the highest level. It's a difficult position to reach. It's even more difficult to maintain. When Lashley left WWE, he wasn't leaving as someone who had been forgotten. He was leaving as a respected veteran with name value, credibility, and years of high-profile experience, despite what MVP might tell you on interviews and how he felt disrespected by Triple H. Some fans saw this chance of him going to AEW as a chance for fresh matchups and a new chapter. Others wondered whether it was worth leaving a company that had already established him as a main event attraction. Looking back, I think it's fair to ask whether the gamble delivered what many expected. And I'm going to tell you guys my thought process behind this. The gamble did not pay off at all for Bobby Lashley. Bobby Lashley, since going to AEW, has not felt the same. Bobby Lashley, since going to AEW, has felt like a shell of himself. He's not the guy that main evented WrestleMania and represented Donald Trump at WrestleMania 23. He's not the same guy that was fighting Dave Bautista for the world championship. He's not the same guy that, was doing all of these different things within the business. Bobby Lashley has lost some of his aura, if not all of it. And I believe that MVP played an important role in Bobby Lashley losing that aura. I lay this down at the feet of one Montel Vontavious Porter, because MVP was the one that gave him the opportunity or spoke to him and told him not to take the deal with WWE. And albeit, sure, they probably paid him more money in AEW. Sure, they probably paid him better. But above all of that, MVP cost Bobby Lashley his image. And that's something, folks, that he may never be able to regain back. And I believe a lot of it was due to the grudge that MVP held against Triple H. And he didn't go into detail, and he won't go into detail as to what this grudge is about. But he's often had a lot of bad things to say about the COO of WWE. And like I said, it's one of those things where I just can't imagine that, WWE would ever bring MVP back. Now, Bobby will probably have an open door, and I'm sure there will come a time where him and Triple H will have a discussion. But MVP, in the meantime, sent Bobby Lashley to AEW, where the big man's career goes to die. And I don't know if Bobby Lashley's career could ever be revived or feel the same as it did when he was carrying around the WWE Championship. What's your thoughts, though? Do you think MVP is to blame for Bobby Lashley's career being ruined? Do you think that it's Triple H's fault? Do you blame Tony Khan? Or do you blame Bobby Lashley? I need to know from you guys your thoughts on this episode of the Sunday Night Stunner Spotlight episode. Until next time, guys, keep those book and pencils sharp. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode of the We Book It podcast. Till next time, peace.